live from KSAT 12. The 6 o'clock news starts right now.
And right now we are waiting for President Joe Biden to begin a news conference at the NATO summit in D.C. This will be the president's first solo news conference since that presidential debate,
which happened exactly 2 weeks ago today. Now, in that time since, President Joe Biden has faced questions from Democrats and Republicans alike about his ability to serve an additional 4 years in the White House. Now, this press conference that you're looking at to the right of your screen, it's expected to begin at any moment. Of course, when that happens, we're going to bring it to you live.
But first here this evening, let's get an update on a traffic backup along 1604 at Highway 281. A crashed cement truck has now been moved off of the highway. Things moving smoothly. Finally, this wreck happened around 1:30 today, but that cleanup and that backup, they took a long time to clear.
Yeah, now this is what the wreck looked like earlier this afternoon. Look at that. San Antonio police say it looks like the driver was heading west when he may have had a collision. They don't think that it was with another vehicle. The truck crashed through the concrete barriers dividing the lanes and ended up on its side in the eastbound lanes. We know the front corner of the truck and the cab, they were smashed. They were ripped in that crash. The driver was rushed to a local hospital with possible life-threatening injuries. And we've told you already that the police shut down the highway.
I wouldn't be able to tell you if it rolled several times or not. I can tell you that probably from what I can see, possibly some slid marks. It probably slid a few 100 feet. So that's what we can see so far.
Police reopened the westbound lanes in less than 2 hours, but eastbound traffic, that was shut off to the, or people were told to go out to the access road until that truck could be hauled away.
All right, let's turn to the forecast now. And fortunately, rain was not a factor in that cleanup, but we've still been watching the radar, Mia.
Yep, we've had a 30% chance for a few isolated downpours, a couple of non-severe thunderstorms throughout the afternoon. Coverage not as high as what we saw the past couple of days. You can see here in Bexar County, while we were monitoring an isolated downpour south of 1604 in the far southern portions of the county about an hour ago, that has since fizzled out. The same with this little cluster of storms over there in Bandera County, in between Medina and Bandera. That is already starting to die down as well. For the most part, the better coverage of rain and non-severe thunderstorms have been across our far southern counties and out west closer to the Rio Grande. A few more storms moving through Valverde County just to the north of Del Rio. Noisy but currently non-severe in Cotulla closer to LaSalle County as well. 30% chance continues through about 7 to 8 p.m. Then whatever's left out there on authority radar does look to fizzle out. Also, like the past couple of days into your Friday. If you didn't find rain today, again, it's not going to be for everybody, but another isolated chance into the afternoon. More of the same into Saturday before temperatures will start to crank up into early next week.
Okay, we'll see you in a bit. Thanks, Mia. Domestic violence was part of the past of a local couple who is now accused of hurting their own 4-month-old baby. That's according to both the Bexar County Sheriff and court records.
Katrina Weber shows us why one of them was previously arrested and also where things stand in this latest case.
Why'd you do it? Why did you hurt your baby?
With his head bowed, 26-year-old Jacobo Jimenez Sanchez ignored reporters' questions, but 26-year-old Andrea Mena couldn't resist.
I didn't hurt my children.
Bexar County Sheriff's investigators disagree. They arrested the couple yesterday at their home near McDonough on charges related to injuries their 4-month-old daughter suffered in May. Sheriff Javier Salazar says hospital staff treating the baby for vomiting also noticed a head injury.
A CT scan revealed that there was brain bleeding, and the doctors also noted that since the baby's last visit, there had been no weight gain.
Salazar told reporters that led to an investigation of what was happening in the family's home. He says one of the couple's other children told a disturbing story.
He had observed the dad, Jacobo, throw the baby on the floor and blood came from her head.
The baby, according to the sheriff, suffered what may be lifelong injuries. The family's life, meanwhile, hasn't exactly been trouble-free. Sanchez was arrested in April after Mena claimed he hurt her and their 4 children. But that domestic violence case was dismissed earlier this week.
There are very few neighbors in this immediate area, but the sheriff says it appears there were several members of the extended family living in this one house, and he believes that someone had to have known what was going on.
You know, myself or the sheriff's office has any say-so in it. I just assume nobody in this family have access to these children.
With both parents in jail for now, the children are in the custody of Child Protective Services. Katrina Weber, KSAT 12 News.
If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, there is help out there. If it's an emergency, text or call 911. But we also have an extensive list of resources on our website, ksat.com/domestic violence. Just scan this QR code you see here, and it will take you straight there.
San Antonio police investigating the death of a 2-year-old at a north side apartment complex. According to SAPD, 2-year-old Amari Joby was found floating in a pool around 8 o'clock this morning. It happened at the Villas del Norte apartments on Vista del Norte. SAPD tells us that Amari's mother started doing CPR on him until EMS arrived, but it wasn't enough. Amari died at the hospital. And we want to take this time to remind you of some water safety tips. Just make sure you or someone else is watching children when they're in the pool. Don't let young children swim alone. And also, it's important to learn CPR skills in case of an emergency.
A man accused of killing his roommate says it was self-defense. That's what Covante Walls told a Bexar County jury today. Walls admits that he did shoot Mario Miller. Erica Hernandez was in court as jurors heard Walls explain his side of the story.
On May 31st, 2022, Mario Miller was found shot in the head at a Northwest Side apartment. Today, jurors heard a neighbor's 911 call after they heard a gunshot.
The bottom neighbor just shot himself, I believe, and the roommate is walking, leaving.
But police say Miller's roommate, Covante Walls, pulled the trigger.
After that 911 call was played, the state then rested. And as the defense took over the case, they called up Walls to testify in his own defense.
He told jurors that Miller moved in about 2 weeks before the shooting. On the day of the shooting, Walls said he was trying to pick up his own money to pay rent.
I noticed stuff around the house was disorderly, and that's when the conversation came up again about the house being the way it was, which is what initially triggered the argument.
That's when Walls said Miller grabbed a gun, then they fought until Walls had control. Walls told the jury that Miller tried to attack him with scissors, then found Walls' rent money and shoved it in his own bag.
And he was just continuing to make threats like, I'm gonna stab you, I'm gonna kill you.
Once there was a wall between them, Walls said he decided to shoot once.
Prior to this, he continued to attack me when he seen me, so I didn't want him to rush me again, so I just fired the shot. It wasn't my intentions to necessarily hit him. It was just to scare him.
That self-defense claim is one the jury will have to consider when they deliberate. Walls faces up to life in prison if found guilty of murder. Erica Hernandez, KSAT 12 News.
While we continue asking about potential plans for the Hemisphere Park area and the San Antonio Spurs, we do have a better idea as to who would be involved in such a possible project. So KSAT recently requested records for the Hemisphere Master Plan, and that request asked about a potential new arena and upgrades to the Alamo Dome and Convention Center. For now, the city is withholding that information. It sent our request to the state attorney general's office, but in our quest for answers, we received a series of letters that companies received who may be working with the city and with the Spurs. Okay, so they are engineering and consulting firms, the Alamo Trust, the San Antonio Local Organizing Committee, and Populous, which is a global architecture firm that specializes in creating entertainment environments and venues. The documents, they show the scale of the project that could also mean upgrades to the Alamo Dome and Convention Center along with a new arena. At this point, we still don't know, though, how much the projects would cost and also who would pay. As for the Spurs, they haven't publicly said anything about a potential downtown arena, so of course, we'll keep asking. Meantime, the home of the Houston Texans is now serving as a medical shelter days after Hurricane Beryl slammed into that city. Houston hospitals are overcrowded, and they can't send some of their patients home because they don't have power. So now NRG Stadium is temporarily housing patients who would normally be discharged. The stadium has 250 beds. The facility is staffed with doctors, nurses, other medical professionals, and EMTs. You so have to feel for the people of Houston. More than 1 million homes and businesses there still don't have power now. People are losing their patience with the city's power provider, which is CenterPoint Energy. So far, around 1.2 million homes have had and businesses have had their power restored. But as we told you, more than 1 million customers still don't have it. CenterPoint's vice president says that the deeper you get into disaster recovery, the slower the pace of repairs.
You can expect the second half of the storm for the run rate not to be 1 million every 48 hours, which is basically what we've done thus far.
So could we be looking at next week with people still out of power?
We're not ready to announce that just yet.
Right now, CenterPoint Energy thinks that 500,000 customers still won't get their power back until sometime next week. Meanwhile, 3 months before Hurricane Beryl, CenterPoint had issued a report that it would need $2 billion to harden its system against extreme weather. Good tunes there. We're shining the spotlight on the local music scene with the latest installment of SA Vibes. That's KSAT's local music series. Each month, we feature a new artist or a new band, and this month, it's Combo Cosmico. It's a psychedelic cumbia band, and you can check them out by scanning the QR code to the left of your screen. You could also watch them on the air this Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
If you happen to have any gently used medical mobility items, things like wheelchairs, for example, and you no longer need them, you might consider donating them to Project Mend. The nonprofit is holding a community drive this weekend at Wonderland of the Americas on Fredericksburg Road. You can drop off those items Saturday between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. And for more information on all of this, just head to KSAT.com. Still ahead here on the news at 6, artificial intelligence is providing some high-tech solutions in healthcare. After the break, see how researchers right here in San Antonio are using AI to improve trauma care.
And now we're going to take a live look outside with our live cam. Look at those beautiful, bright blue, sunny skies. Meteorologist Mia Montgomery is going to tell us about our chances for more downpours. That's coming up.
Changes coming soon on the far north side because of planned construction. Tonight on the Night Beat, we're breaking down this bond project that's going to connect another road to 1604 and showing you how one city council member is trying to cut down construction delays with a new request in the city.
So we continue to see all the ways that people and companies are using artificial intelligence. And now we see how AI is also affecting the healthcare industry.
And right here in San Antonio, researchers are leveraging AI to enhance trauma care. Tiffany Huertas explores how this project could improve patient outcomes and help doctors or first responders make faster decisions.
Amina Kudab was introduced to artificial intelligence many years ago.
My father started very, very early on as a pioneer in AI at Bell Labs. And so in childhood, I really didn't think of AI as this big, scary creature, what people I often think of now.
Kudab was drawn to delve deeper into AI. She is now an associate professor in the Department of Biomedical and Chemical Engineering at UTSA.
I study the brain at the cellular level, the human brain. And I would say AI is trying to mimic how the human brain quickly responds to different tasks and makes decisions.
The professor is also part of a new AI-driven project aimed at potentially saving lives.
Researchers are inputting the data into a system, and that system will be able to figure out what is the best way to respond.
Yes.
And there's someone that is critically hurt.
Yes, Tiffany. So it includes everything from traffic data to how the weather is and all the other things that lead to transport delays.
Professor Kudab is working with a group of researchers on a project to create AI tools that enhance decision-making for clinicians in trauma care.
It would identify when there's a next emergency what to do best. And so on the fly, the EMT, the ambulance driver would have that information right away on their dashboard or in the vehicle.
Recently, researchers were awarded a $1 million grant by the Trauma Research and Combat Casualty Care Collaborative, an initiative of the University of Texas system.
We hope we are a pilot that people can use as an exemplar of how AI can make the most of data sets. And so while we're building it for Texas, we imagine it will be a model that's used across the nation and internationally.
Ultimately, you could be saving lives.
That's the goal within hopefully within years rather than decades.
The group aims to finish this project within 16 months. Tiffany Huertas, KSAT 12 News.
UTSA and UT Health San Antonio launched the nation's first dual degree program in medicine and AI last fall. You can find more information about that on our website at KSAT.com. Want to let you know we are still watching and waiting for President Biden to start that news conference. We're keeping tabs on it. We'll bring it to you live as soon as it begins, but we are not there yet.
All right, but we do want to talk about what's happening outside, because if you go outside, at least in our immediate area, downtown San Antonio, it looks beautiful out there.
It does.
We have a lot of cameras around town, but if you point them to the south, you might see something.
You might see something, some grayer skies, some higher clouds as well. Yep, in an area that desperately needs it. Our southern counties way out west, closer to the Rio Grande, tapping in to some downpours and a couple of non-severe thunderstorms. Let's get you the latest look here at your authority radar. Again, here in San Antonio, pretty slim pickings out there this Thursday evening. On Tuesday, the northern half of Bexar County cashed into some needed rainfall. There were pockets of 2+ inches of rain in between the north side, North 1604, and the north portions of Bexar County. Yesterday, the central and southern portions of San Antonio saw some heftier downpours. Again, right now, not a whole lot going on here in San Antonio proper. Up there in Bandera County, though, just to the south of Highway 16, a couple of isolated thunderstorms weakening as that works its way farther off to the south. But a different story, though, across our far southern and western counties. Take a look east of Comstock in parts of Valverde County. Noisy, but a few non-severe thunderstorms continue to drift their way farther off to the south as well as the west, and near Cotulla as well, cashed into some needed rainfall there. Generally with the activity today, and like the past several afternoons, it has been, yes, a bit noisy out there with some lightning and thunder, but generally just some pockets of heavy rain and a few gusty winds from time to time. Let's take a look at some of the rainfall totals, though, closer to the San Antonio area. The southern side of Bexar County, south of 1604, saw a downpour at the top of the 5 p.m. hour, about 0.3 of an inch recorded there. Eastern Frio County, east of I-35, about 1.5 inches. Near Hallettsville, same, about 1.5 inches there as well. In Concan, near the Frio River, over 1 inch of needed rain also recorded there. And that is also an area that is still under severe drought. This is the latest drought monitor update that was released earlier this morning. It does not include the rain that we saw yesterday or Tuesday, but it does include the rain that some of us were able to tap into last Saturday. Unfortunately, though, not enough to note any notable changes out there. Extreme drought still in place across portions of the hill country, and another pocket of that way out west near Del Rio and closer to the Rio Grande. Where do we go from here? Well, over the next several hours, generally through about 7 to 8 p.m., we'll hold on to a 30% potential for a few more isolated downpours to develop. Then into Friday, while it's not going to be for everybody, if you didn't find any rain today, there is the potential, another 30% chance to find a few more isolated downpours to a non-severe thunderstorm, similar to the setup that we've seen out there this afternoon. After we lose that daytime heat and the sun goes down, whatever is left out there does look to fizzle out. More of the same, copy and paste into the first half of the weekend, but then notice into early next week, rain chances come down, and that's when we're going to be focusing on temperatures that are going to crank back up. So here's that setup. High pressure right now over the Gulf of Mexico. Take a look at temperatures off to our east. Not too bad. 84 in New Orleans, 88 in Mobile. Check out this heat high, though, over the desert southwest. 117 degrees is the current temperature in Las Vegas. How about 115 over in Phoenix? That high pressure system is going to start to work its way farther off to the east near the Rockies by Sunday. Our eyes, though, are going to be the one is over the high pressure system near the Gulf right now. That's going to start to work its way closer to the state of Texas, and that is why temperatures are expected to crank back up into early next week. So 94 on Saturday, 96 your forecast high on Sunday, and then upper 90s closing in on that triple-digit mark in store early next week as well. Right now, mixed bag of upper 80s and low 90s in and around San Antonio and surrounding communities. We're going to start off tomorrow in the mid-70s by 7 a.m. with mostly cloudy skies expected, 88 by 1 p.m. If you don't find any rain, it's still going to be a hot and humid one out there with the forecast high right around 93 degrees. I think low to mid 90s is going to be a common trend in and around the San Antonio area. Again, feeling closer to the triple digits, upper 90s when you factor in all of that moisture. More of the same in store on Saturday before we start to see those temperatures reach for the upper 90s early next week. By the way, Saturday and Sunday, also when we could see a plume of Saharan dust work back in. So you might notice a little bit more of a haze in the south central Texas sky.
As we creep towards 100. Thanks, Mia.
So it's interesting. Wemby's just in the beginning of his career, like the very, very beginning of his career. But I'm sure he's going to have to buy or set up a lot of shelves in his home for the awards.
He might just have to get a whole new wing on one of his house, right, for all
Just
those
for
awards.
the awards.
Exactly. So, hey, Victor Wembanyama, he is up for an ESPY tonight as the best breakthrough athlete. And Dak Prescott says CeeDee Lamb will be ready to go. Coming up.
Do you think CeeDee will work out with you guys?
That's the plan. Yeah, that's the plan. That's the plan.
Dak expects CeeDee to be present when he gets together with his wideouts and tight ends to work out before the start of training camp in big board sports. Your reigning NBA Rookie of the Year, Victor Wembanyama, is up for an ESPY tonight, nominated for the Best Breakthrough Athlete of the Year. His rookie season was eye-opening, and it felt like every time that he took the court, he was setting a new record, on top of breaking off some awesome plays at both ends of the court. Wemby is one of 4 ESPY nominees for the 2024 Best Breakthrough Athlete of the Year. Joining Wemby are LSU gymnast Haley Bryant, Southern Cal basketball player Juju Watkins, and Houston Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud. The ESPYs are scheduled to air tonight at 7 live right here on KSAT 12. Now, the Spurs today announced the schedule for the 2024-25 preseason games. They will play 5 in total, with a trio of games at home and the 2 others on the road. That will give us our first look of Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes playing alongside Wemby and that young Spurs roster. So their first 3 preseason games are all at the Frostbank Center, Monday, October the 7th against the Thunder, October 9th against the Magic, and Saturday, October 12th versus the Utah Jazz. They'll close out the preseason on the road October 15th at Miami, and then Thursday, October 17th at the Houston Rockets. And men's basketball, Team USA beat Canada 86-72 last night in Las Vegas. Anthony Edwards led the Americans with 13 points off the bench. Steph Curry scored 12, and Drew Holiday was next in line with 11 points. The U.S. outshot Canada 51-34%. During post, head coach Steve Kerr said, not too shabby.
Good first game for us. We're really just getting started, 4 days of practice. You could see the rust on the offensive end. A lot of turnovers in that first half especially. But I loved the defensive intensity and the work on the glass. So it was a good first effort, and we needed to set a tone for how we want to play, and I think we did that.
The U.S. will next play 2 games in Abu Dhabi, Monday, July 15th against Australia, and then Wednesday versus Serbia. Dak Prescott throwing deep to wide receiver CeeDee Lamb was definitely fun to watch, and with Lamb holding out for a long-term extension, we don't know when we will see these two connect again. Lamb is entering the final year of his rookie deal that will pay him $18 million this season. He's already incurred more than $100K in fines for skipping the team's offseason program. Dak says they've worked out together on their own and that Lamb is ready to go, and apparently I need to toss back to you ladies at the desk.
Yeah, we're going to go out live. This is the President Joe Biden. They're taking the podium. This is the first time that he's held a press conference in 2 weeks since that debate.
Yeah, let's listen live from D.C.
Out of the wreckage of World War II, the most destructive war in history. The idea was to create an alliance of free and democratic nations that would commit themselves to a compact of collective defense. Standing together, they knew we'd all be safer. An attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. And it's worked because a would-be aggressor knows if they attack one of us, they'll be attacked by all of us. Sending that message is the best way to deter aggression and prevent wars in the first place. For those who thought NATO's time had passed, they got a rude awakening when Putin invaded Ukraine. Some of the oldest and deepest fears in Europe roared back to life. Because once again, a murderous madman was on the march. But this time, no one cowered in appeasement, especially the United States. We collected intelligence that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine months before the invasion. I directed the intelligence community to be a significant amount of intelligence be declassified so I could start building an international coalition to oppose the invasion. Then in February, some of you remember, I warned the world that the invasion was imminent. I rallied a coalition of 50 nations from Europe to Asia to help Ukraine defend itself. Many foreign policy experts thought as Putin amassed Russian forces just 100 miles north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. But Putin thought it was the mother home of Russia. The capital would fall in less than a week. But the Ukrainian people, backed by a coalition to help build, stopped them. Today, Kyiv still stands, and NATO stands stronger than it has ever been. During the week of this summit, several heads of states made it a point in their statements to thank the United States and to thank me personally for all that NATO has achieved. NATO is not only stronger, NATO is bigger because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance, and it makes a gigantic difference. Excuse me. Meanwhile, my predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said. But I made it clear a strong NATO is essential to American security. And I believe the obligation of Article 5 is sacred. And I would remind all Americans, Article 5 is invoked only once in NATO's long history, and that was to defend America after 9/11. I made it clear that I will not bow down to Putin. I will not walk away from Ukraine. I will keep NATO strong. That's exactly what we did, and exactly what we'll continue to do. Now, the future of American policy is up to the American people. This is much more than a political question. It's more than that. It's a national security issue. Don't reduce this to the usual testament that people talk about, issues of being a political campaign. It's far too important. It's about the world we live in for decades to come. Every American must ask herself or himself, is the world safer with NATO? Are you safer? Is your family safer? I believe the American people know the answer to all those questions is yes. And I believe the American people understand that America is stronger because of our alliances. I believe the American consensus from Truman to Reagan to me still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world. We're an indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright wrote. Now let me turn to three other key issues. Just this morning, we had a great economic report showing inflation is down. Overall prices fell last month. Core inflation is the lowest it's been in 3 years. Prices are falling for cars, appliances, and airfares. Grocery prices have fallen since the start of the year. We're going to keep working to take down corporate greed to bring those prices down further. Meanwhile, Trump's calling for a 10% tariff on everything Americans buy, including food from overseas, vegetables, and other necessities. And economists tell us that would cost the average American working family another $2,500 a year. It's a tax of $2,500 a year. Second, our efforts to secure the border, southern border, is working. After Trump killed the bipartisan effort to secure the border, Republicans and Democrats had worked on, because he thought it would benefit me and make him a loser, Republicans walked away. So I took executive action last month. As a consequence, working with Mexico, border encounters have gone down over 50%. The current level is lower today than when Trump left office. Third, for months, the United States has been working to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, to bring the hostages home, to create a path for peace and stability in the Middle East. 6 weeks ago, I laid out a detailed plan in writing. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7. That framework is now agreed on by both Israel and Hamas. So I sent my team to the region to hammer out the details. These are difficult, complex issues. There's still gaps to close. We're making progress. The trend is positive. And I'm determined to get this deal done and bring an end to this war, which should end now. Let me conclude where I began. We're the United States of America. We are the indispensable nation. Our leadership matters. Our partnerships matter. This moment matters. We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here. Reuters, Jeff Mason.
Mr. President, your political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called on you to step aside. Reuters is reporting tonight that UAW leadership is concerned about your ability to win.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Thank you. My question for you is, how are you incorporating these developments into your decision to stay? And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one, the fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now, later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. And because, look, I got more work to do. We've got more work to finish. There's so much, we made so much progress. Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to trade places with our economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million, so things are moving. We got more to go. Working class people still need help. Corporate greed is still at large. The prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down, and so I'm optimistic about where things are going. Danny Kemp, AFP.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about you mixed up Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today. And you now have sort of your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the President of France, and the German Chancellor having to step in and make excuses for you on that. Officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing in my leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, Putin. I said, oh, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys, the idea anybody suggests that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference. How many times did you hear in that conference, I know it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden, because Biden did the following. Look, folks, this is well, anyway, I thought it was the most successful conference I've attended in a long time, and find me a world leader who didn't think it was. Next one, Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned other instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge, but what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your friends, supporters, people who think you've done a great job over the past 4 years. Have you spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy, which you've worked decades to build, if you stay in the race, despite the concerns that voters say they have, and you lose to someone who you yourself have argued is unfit to return to the Oval Office?
Well, look, I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started. As you recall, understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward, can't do that, it's going to cause inflation, things are going to skyrocket, the debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists? 16 economic Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job. That under my plans so far and what's going to happen in the future if I'm reelected, that things are going to get much better. Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected to stop the trickle-down economic theory, that if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well. My dad was a well-read, decent guy. I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table. Middle-class people and working-class people need help. And so what happened is I decided to was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator. And that is that the way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. That way we grow the economy. And the wealthy still do very well. They do fine. And guess what? Find me an economist, a mainstream economist who said we haven't done well. What have we not done that isn't working right now? And so we got more to do, though. We got to finish the job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world. Delaware has more corporations registered in Delaware than every other state in the nation combined. I'm not anti-corporate, but corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic, doubled. It's time things get back in order a little bit. It's time, for example, if I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase, corporate rents for apartments and the like and homes are limited to 5%. We're going to make a lot of changes that I've been talking about because we're going to continue to grow this economy. And by the way, remember how I got so roundly criticized for being so pro-union, not labor, union. Well, guess what? I've been the most pro-union labor president in history. Not a joke. And guess what? We had the Treasury Department do a study. When unions do better, everybody does better. Everybody does better. And we talk about how, for example, remember when we talked about getting the computer chip industry back in the United States? Used to be 40% of the industry. We invented the chip. 40% of the industry was in the United States. And former presidents decided that the best way to do it is find the cheapest labor in the world, send the product over there, and import what the product was. And so what did I do? I was told not to go over to Asia, including Europe, but Asia. And I remember going to South Korea, convincing them to invest $20 billion in the United States to build computer chip factories. And I asked why when they finally decided to do it. And the answer was because you have the safest economy in the world and you have the best workers in the world. So the whole idea here is we've invested, there's over $50 billion in investment in computer chip manufacturing just coming into being. None of you thought that would happen. None of you thought that would happen. But it's happening. It's happening. And it's going to grow economies. All through, and by the way, red states and blue states. Manufacturers as much in red states as blue states. I've made no distinction. So my generic point is that the idea that we can't continue to build and grow the economy, make it fair. Like I said, from my standpoint, when the middle class does well, that's when the whole economy grows. The poor have a shot, the wealthy do well. But the wealthy got to start paying their taxes.
As a follow-up, sir, you mentioned that
your Vice President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate on that? What is it about her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate, she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning, I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her. Felicia Schwartz, Financial Times.
Thank you, Mr. President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have?
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true. Look, what I said was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting a fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you looked at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing. And I have, I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events, some with thousands of people showing up. And so I just think it's better. I always have an inclination, whether I was playing sports or doing politics, just to keep going, not stop. I just got to just pace myself a little more. Pace myself. And the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before. Anyway, that's what it was about. That's what it was about. And by the way, even with that, I love my staff, but they add things all the time. At the very end, I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway, I'm sorry. Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions for you. First, on the NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that, in his public remarks afterwards, saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We've allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near or abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, the weaponry we're getting to him? I've gotten a more long-range capacity, as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis on what they should and shouldn't go, how far they should go in. That's a logical thing to do. Second question related to
Bad nights, sir? How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or on some matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's gotten more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs just last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None. What I got here? Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
The elections in the US have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States. But there is a concern. Many people in Poland and across Europe are worried that the former president may win the election. And there's a lot of concern that Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push Ukraine to give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible US disengagement?
Well, look, I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving? I've not had any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. It'd be a disaster. It'd be a disaster. I mean, I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine, that that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, et cetera. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine, as you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. That's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? In my office. I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes. I beg your pardon? And so Finland joined NATO, 800-mile border is a significant, and they were already allies, but they weren't part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe, I can't recall whether he said it public in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind it being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together, to dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. took a lot of selling to some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations, 50, to support Ukraine. 50. We were able to bring about a coalition of Europe and Asia, Japan and South Korea. I just we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world. The Cold War is over. The post-war era is over. What is going to replace it? And I respectfully suggest I have a pretty good idea what that should be. I've convinced a lot of people to follow it. And we're just going to get stronger. David Sanger. Where's it?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Be nice, David.
Mr. President, the NATO declaration that was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place in the past 2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time ago. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe